Today, I will be presenting my case on the rights of the accused persons, the Supreme Court case Miranda versus Arizona, 1966. Arguably one of the most important Supreme Court cases of all time was the case on the accused person's rights, Miranda versus Arizona in 1966. The ruling in the case and others like it protect the accused person from the power of the state. These decisions have made it more difficult for the government to convict accused persons. Sometimes people whom courts often found guilty have gained their freedom on technicalities of legal procedure unrelated to a person's guilt or innocence. So that means that even if the accused person was guilty or innocent, there's something happened with the case because of legal technicalities or problems that happened in the legal system. Now the courts changed decisions on a more just basis. All this to say that the results of this court case gave us our Miranda rights. In this paper, the following will be discussed. First, what is the context behind this case? How did this case go? And what are the ethical issues behind this case? And what were the results and outcomes of this case? Okay, moving on. So some context. First, for a long time, there was no question of how authorities obtained evidence of wrongdoing or about the treatment of suspects while they were in police custody. In the 1914, the court decided that the federal government could not use evidence in a federal trial that officers had obtained from a private residence without a search warrant. The exclusionary rule was extended to the state courts in Mapp versus Ohio in 1961. This was one of the many cases in 1960 that allowed accused persons greater rights and protection in legal proceedings. In result, many critics of the court described it as being soft on crime, which is reasonable because when you think of someone being accused, often people don't realize that they're being accused, they're not found guilty. So you want that person who's being accused to face immediate punishment because people usually don't realize that the person being accused is being accused. He has not been convicted. He or she has not yet been convicted. So, okay. This allowed accused persons greater rights and protections in legal proceedings. In results, many critics of the court described it as being soft on crime. It was unanimously decided in Gideon versus Wainwright 1963 that the Sixth Amendment right of an accused person to have the assistance of an attorney was now applicable in state trials as well as federal trials in state and federal trials. In 1964's Escobar versus Illinois case, it was decided that the police cannot deny the accused the right to an attorney present during questioning, and the police had to inform these rights. So basically, in the 1964 case, Escobar versus Illinois, the primary holding from this decided that that the police had to inform the accused of their right to have an attorney, but this didn't mean it was set into law. So basically, this was just the court telling the police after this case that from now on, they have to inform people of their rights to an attorney, but it was not set into law or on paper yet. All this contributed to greater rights and protections for accused persons in legal proceedings and were cases that correlated with the Miranda case. So, what is the Miranda case about? In Phoenix, Arizona, police arrested Ernesto Miranda on March 13, 1963. In the article 1966, Miranda versus Arizona, by the Library of Congress, it says he was arrested on charges of rape and kidnapping after a witness identified him in Phoenix, Arizona. During his 2-hour interrogation, police did not advise Miranda of his constitutional rights to an attorney nor against self-incrimination. Eventually, Miranda ended up giving a written confession and a jury convicted him, but this was just the start. Okay, moving on. What happened? So In addition, Miranda appealed his conviction to the Supreme Court. What I should say that Miranda's lawyer made an appeal to the Supreme Court in 1968. In the article 1966, Miranda versus Arizona by the Library of Congress, it states Miranda's lawyer, Alvin Moore, appealed the case to the Arizona Supreme Court, which reaffirmed the lower court's decision, arguing that the police had not violated Miranda's constitutional rights in procuring a confession without the presence of a lawyer. So basically what happened here is Miranda's lawyer made an appeal saying that his rights were violated when obtaining the confession. But the Supreme Court the Arizona Supreme Court, which is often confused for the federal Supreme Court, and there's actually a difference. There's the state Supreme Court and the federal Supreme Court. But anyways, the federal Supreme Court reaffirmed the lower court's decision and said that there was and argued that his rights were not violated from this. But it's pretty obvious his rights were violated because he was not informed and being interrogated for 2 hours without an attorney present. When the case got to the Supreme Court, it ended up being different. Chief Justice Earl Warren articulated that the court permitted confessions of self-incriminating statements in criminal trials only when suspects issued them deliberately after police informed them of their rights. So what this is saying is that basically, confessions are only valid evidence to use in court when they're obtained after the police informed the accused of their rights. So in a 5-4 decision on the case, it was decided that because Miranda was not informed of his rights before his confession was not valid evidence. His Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights were both violated. The court said that the Fifth Amendment's protection against self-incrimination applies in all settings. The Sixth Amendment makes sure criminal suspects have the right to a personal or assigned attorney. After Arizona's ruling was overturned, the state court decided to retire the case without representing Miranda's confession. So the confession he made originally was not valid evidence to use in the case. After they after this happened though, and he got a second chance, basically a retrial, they still convicted him on the same charges. He was sentenced to a maximum of 30 years in prison. After he was released 4 years later on parole, he was stabbed to death by another man, and this man was able to get his due process and was informed his rights. To expand, let's talk about the ethics. Although there are not necessarily many said ethical perspectives on the case, there is another way it was looked at. In the United States Court's article, Facts and Case Summary, Miranda versus Arizona, it says the court further held that without proper safeguards, the process of in-custody interrogation of persons suspected or accused of crime contains inherently compelling pressures which work to undermine the individual's will to resist and to compel him to speak where he would otherwise do so freely. What seems to be the thought process behind this is that the ethical problem is that the authorities can be manipulative when not informing of the accused of their rights. So if you don't inform the accused of their rights, you're basically manipulating and pressuring the accused into telling you what happened, but yet they think that this is their only option is to talk, but that's not the case. They should be informed that they have the right to attorney and they do not have to speak. They have the right to remain silent. From the jury's side, it would make sense that they felt hate if they were told man in front of them raped and kidnapped someone. Personally, I understand the jury's side most. The reason is because he admitted to the crime himself. Even if he was not told his rights and was pressured, I still think that the case should have been closed when he confessed, especially because the severity of the crime he confessed to. In the end, all things happen for a reason, and God has a plan. So even though like me and I would have been or done what the jury would, I would have said the same thing the jury said. God has his own plan. Romans 8:28 says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Even though Miranda was allowed a second chance, when I think it was not ethically logical to, God made good come out of it by by the case resulting in our Miranda rights. I also know that God is the ultimate judge, so he will have the final say in everything, and his judgment is righteous. In conclusion, the Miranda case was vital and heavily contributed to the protection of the accused individual's rights. As a result of the case, the Miranda rights were birthed. It is now required for police to inform the accused of the following rights when arrested. First, you have the right to remain silent. The second says that anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The third states you have the right to an attorney. The last one says that if you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Lastly, the police will ask if the accused understands and if they are willing to speak. These Miranda rights are recited every day and must be recited by officers each time someone is arrested. So these Miranda rights are not a thing of the past. They're constantly being used every day, every time, or should be used every day, every time a police officer arrests someone. Because of these rights, people will now have more freedom, greater protection from the government, and an awareness of their rights.